In this video, I'm going to discuss introduction to file handling in structured programming or C programming. So first of all, let's see what is a file. A file represents a sequence of bytes. So in programming, we have to use a text file or a binary file. So it may be a text or binary file. So a file is a container in a computer storage devices used for storing data, right? So simply we can say file is a container in a storage device used for storing data. The next one is why files are needed. So when program is terminated or when a program come to the end, entire data will be lost, right? So storing in a file will preserve data even if program terminates. That means we can preserve data so that we can use again, or what we call we can reuse data stored in a file. So it will take a lot of time to insert a large number of data to the program, right? So if you want to feed some data, some a large amount of data to the program, it will take a lot of time, right? But if there is a file containing all the data, then it can easily access the content of the file using C programming, right? So at the same time, so it can be easily moved from one computer to the another without any changing, right? So if you have file containing all the data, it is easy to handle them, right? So using programming. Next one is what is file handling, right? So in by using a C programming, so we can read file which are stored in disk. At the same time, we can write file to the disk. All right. So those files can be ASCII text files, or we call text file, or a binary file. Right. So by using C program, we can read the files from the disk. At the same time, we can write file to the disk. It may be a text or binary file. So there are two types of files, right? So we already know there are two types of files using in C programming. The first one is text file, the next one is the binary files, right? If it is text file, text files are normally we call .txt file, and text files can be created using any simple text editors, and it may be a notepad or notepad plus plus, even wordpad applications we can create text files. So all the contents within the files as plain text. So in text files, so all the contents are uh, uh, appear as a plain text. For files can be easily edit or delete the contents. In text files, we can easily edit and delete the contents. Then they take minimum effort to maintain, and they are easily readable and provide least security and takes bigger storage space, right? So since the contents are appeared as a plain text, they provide least security, right, and easily readable. Next one is binary files. So binary files are mostly the .bin files in computer. So instead of storing as a plain text, they stored it in the binary forms. That means zeros and ones. So they can hold a large amount of data. Since data are stored in a binary format, they can hold large amount of data. So they are not readable easily, right? So we can't read easily, right? So because the content are stored in a binary format, therefore they provide better security than the text file. Okay, next one is what is a variable, right? So we discuss a variable in our lesson number, I think 2 or 3, right? So we know what is variable, right? So usually a variable is a container to hold data. So by using variables, we can store data in variables, right? So if you want to store a value 10, which is a decimal value, so we can create a variable, let's see, num1 of the type integer. So this is how we create a variable in C programming, right? So actually what will happen, so this a variable, when you create the variable, it will be allocated a specific memory cell from the main memory, right? So usually we use RAM as a main memory in our computer, right? So this is assume this is RAM. So if you create a variable, or when you declare variable like this of the type integer, then uh, they allocate a memory space for integer variable, right, like this, right? So once if you assign value to that variable, that value is stored in a allocated memory space, right? So in addition to that, so if it is a memory space, right, probably those memory cells or this memory space has its own address, right, like this, right? So in here I'll put address in hexadecimal number format, right? So like this, so these are the address, right? So this particular row starting from so AF01 like that. Likewise these addresses are continuous, right? So if you want to print the value of variable num1, so this is how we print the value of variable num1, right? So in C program there's a command called printf, so we can use that printf command. So since num1 is a decimal number, so here we can use the format percentage %d. So percentage %d and comma the variable name, then it will print the related value, the relevant value, right? So apart from the value of the variable, right, so apart from the value of the variable, every variable has its own address, right? So now you know what is address. Address means where it is located in the memory space, right? So if you want to print the address of the variable, right, so if you want to print the value of the variable, so just using the variable name inside the printf command, we can print the value of the variable. But if you want to print the address of the variable, we can use the symbol called n percent, n symbol, right? So we can use n before the variable name, then you can print the address of the variable, right? So if you want to print the address of the variable num1, so this is how we print the address of the variable num1, right? So if you want to print the hexadecimal value, right, so this is not, right? So if you want to print the hexadecimal value, here we have to put the hexadecimal format, so that should be uh, x, right? So x is the hexadecimal format. So if you want to print the address of the variable, we can use the format as x, and the address of the num1 can be represented using n% before the variable name, then it will print at the relevant address, right? So in this case the address is hexadecimal 3f08, then it will be printed, right? Okay, next one is what is a pointer. So a pointer is a variable that store address of another variable, right? So we have already known that. So if you are if you have declare a variable which contain a value, so apart from that value, that variable has its own address. So if you want to store the address of a variable, then we have to create a special kind of variable called a pointer, right? So a pointer can also be used to refer to another pointer function, right? So a pointer can be incremented or decremented, right? That is to point to the next or previous memory location, right? So the purpose of the pointer is save a memory space and achieve faster execution time, right? So let's take an example, right? So by using pointer, right, we can store a address of another variable. So before using pointer, we have to declare a pointer. So let's see how to declare a pointer, right? So this is how we declare a pointer. So this is the syntax. First of all, we have to specify the data type, then name or the identifier for the pointer variable name. But before the pointer identifier, or the beginning of the pointer identifier, we have to use the symbol called asterisk, right? So always pointer identifier come up with or along with the asterisk symbol. So what is data type? The data type of the pointer should be the data type of the variable that pointer points to, right? So for example, if you want to store the address of a variable of the type integer, then the pointer data type should be integer. So if you want to store the address of float data type or the float variable, then the data type of the pointer should be float. So likewise, the data type of the pointer uh, should be equal to the pointer points variable data type, right? So asterisk indicate the declaring and pointer, right? So asterisk symbol indicate declare a pointer. So how to initialize a pointer, right? So to get the address of a variable, you know that we have to use n% uh, before the name of the variable, right? So assume there is a variable called say num, right? So if you want to get the address of the num variable, you have to use n% num. So in generally we can say pointer can be assigned the address of a variable. So this is how we get the address, right? So by using n% before the name of the variable, right? Okay, let's take an example how to use pointers. So I'll create a variable called num1 of the type integer, and then at the same time I assign the value 10 to the variable num1, right? So this is how we declare integer variable and assign a value. So actually what will happen, so inside the main memory, so that is the RAM, right? So it will be allocated a memory space labeled by num1, and then the value 10 will be stored in that allocated memory space like this, right? So now we know that, so each and every memory space has its own address, so that is unique, right? So in here, so these are the address of the first memory cell of the relevant row, right? So for example, this is AF01, so this is AF02. Likewise, there are so many memory cells, right? So I just label the address of first column cells, so cells which are in first column, right? So then if you print the value of num1, the relevant value will be printed, that is 10. Then if you print the address of num1, the relevant address will be printed. So in here I'll print the address of the type hexadecimal format, right? So here I specify hexadecimal format, so the relevant address will be uh, printed, right? So now assume I want to store the address of variable num1 in a pointer, right? So therefore I have to create a pointer of the type integer, because num1 variable is integer data type, right? So if I want to store the address of num1 variable, I have to declare a pointer of the type integer. So this is how we create a integer pointer. So I'll create a pointer of the type integer. So then data type specified as an integer, and then I label the pointer as p num1. And especially if you declare, so when you declare a pointer, we have to start with the asterisk symbol, asterisk symbol. So then I can allocated memory space like this, right? So then, so inside the memory, so there will be a they will allocate a memory space something like this, or the memory will get space will be allocated for the declared a pointer p num1, right? Then I can assign the address of a num1 variable to the pointer p num1. So then actually what will happen, the address of num1 is 3f08, so that value will be stored the allocated memory cell of the pointer, or the address of num1 stored in p num1 pointer. Then if you print the value of p num1 like this, in here I print the value of p num1 of the type hexadecimal, then that value will be printed. Now the value of p num1 is the address of num1, then 3f08 will be printed. At the same time, so p num1, the memory cell p num1 has its own address. So if you want to print the address of p num1, so likewise here we can print the address of p num1, then the relevant address will be printed. So that is AF01. So I think now you get the basic idea of the pointer, right? So why do we use pointer? We can store the address of a variable inside the pointer. So that's it, right? Okay, next one is what are the file operations? So it can be performed four major operations on files. So it may be a text file or a binary file. The first one is creating a file, right? So first of all we have to create a file. Then next one is opening and existing files. That means once if you create the file, then you can open and created file. Then we can read the content of the existing file, or we can write some information or the content to the file. Last one is closing a file. So once if you read or write from or to the file, so finally you have to close the file. So those are the major file operations that we can do over the files: opening a file, reading from the file, writing to the file, and closing the files, right? Okay, so these are the main operations or the file. So under the file handling using the C programming, so we can do these operations over the files. So I'll demonstrate how to create pointers, right? So let's see how to create pointers in C programming, right? So then you will realize the usage of pointer, right? So I'll take a new file, right? So then first of all I'll include the header file like this, and then I declare the main method, right, like this, and then I'll create a variable called say int num1, and then directly I assign the value. Then if you want, I can print the value of the variable num1. So since this is integer value, you specify the format as integer, and then I print the value like this, right? So this is my first example. So therefore in file handling I say, so this is pointer 1.c, right? Okay, which is already exists, so therefore I replace it. So if you print this, then it will be printed the relevant value, that is num1, right? So we can print this, it will be printed the value, that is 10, right? The value of num1 is 10. So if you want to print the address of num1, so how can we print the address of num1? Here it doesn't matter. If you want, we can use the decimal format of the address. So how can we retrieve the address? You can use the n%, n num1, right? So if you use the n num1, so it will be printed the address of num1 variable like this. So in here we can see, so this is the address of num1 variable 235 something, some random value, right? So for convenience I put go to the next line, right? So go to the next line. So here I print the decimal format of the address. So if you want to print the hexadecimal format, here we have to specify hexadecimal value, right? So then we can have a hexadecimal value of the address like this, right? So here we can find, so this is the value of a variable 10. So this is the decimal format of the address. So this is the hexadecimal format of the address, right? So if you convert this value into the hexadecimal, so this is the relevant hexadecimal value, right? So most of the times the address are labeled, or the memory address are labeled by the hexadecimal number format, right? Then so next one is how to store the address of a variable, address of the variable. So in that case we have to declare a pointer. So if you want to store the address of an integer variable, we have to create integer pointer. So let's see how to create integer pointer. So data type is integer, then you have to use the asterisk symbol, then I use a p num1, right? P num1, right? So in here we can assign the address of num1 variable to the pointer p num1, right? Here we can assign the address of num1 to the p num1, right? So then if you print the value of p num1, right? So here I print the value of p num1, right? So if I print the value of p num1 in decimal format, So here we can specify decimal. So here I pin the value of p1 like this, right? So I compile this and run it, right? So here now you can see, yeah, actually here I assign the value, but what I want to uh, assign the address of p number. Then you have to use the n%, right? N%. Then if you print it, now you can see, right? So the value of num1 is 10. So it's better to print the message along with the value here. So this is the value of num1. Then I see num1 equal this. So here this is the address of num1, so here address of num1 is in decimal format. Here the address of num1 is in hexadecimal format. Here the value of p num1, right? So value of p num1, or we can say p num1 in here, in this case decimal format. If you want, we can print the value of p num1 in hexadecimal format as well. So here we can specify hexadecimal format, right? So now let's see, right? So I'll compile this and I execute, right? Now you can see value of num1 is 10. Value of num1 is 10 here. Value of num1 is 10. Address of num1 is this random number. Address of num1 in hexadecimal is this. Then the value of p num1 is the address of num1. That means inside this pointer we can store the address of num1 variable, right? So this is in decimal format. This is in hexadecimal format, right? So likewise we can use pointer to store the address of another variable, so that's about the pointer. So in next video I'll explain how to use this pointer in file processing, right? So how to use pointers in file handling, right? Okay, thank you very much.